Hey guys, welcome to this video for knowing what yoga poses to swap out when your students have SI or SPD, so any sort of pelvic instability issues going on in their body. So this particular video was made with yoga teachers in mind. However, if you've got any pelvic instability issues and are practicing yoga and just want to know what swaps to make, it may also be appropriate for you. So this video was made in response to another video that I created, which was all about catering for women with these issues in your yoga classes. So if you haven't already gone and seen that one, I'll leave the link below for you to go and check out. But in today's video, I really want to go through some common poses that we put in pregnancy yoga classes and what you can do instead with those women who are suffering from SI pain or SPD pain. Because I think it's really important to know how to safely cater for their bodies, because I know you don't want to be creating any further issues in their body than they're already experiencing. Before we get into these 6 poses, I just want to let you know I have created a free basics guide for teaching pregnancy and postnatal yoga. If you haven't already downloaded that one, I'll leave the links below. All right, let's start with some poses down on the floor, basically because that's where I already have the camera set up and I'm being lazy and I don't want to change it. So let's start with our wide leg forward fold, really common pose that we do in pregnancy yoga. So often we bring women up onto a bolster just so that if they've got tight hamstrings, it brings the hips a little higher than the knees and makes this pose a lot easier. Obviously, if you've got SI issues or any pelvic instability, this wide leg pose is not suitable. It's going to create further widening in the pelvis and it's just going to be really painful. So when you bring the rest of your class here, which for many women who don't have this issue, they will need this pose. This is a great pregnancy yoga pose. It's opening through the pelvis, it's helping to create space and alignment. But for those women with pelvic instability, instead of bringing them here, because you've already got the bolster, I recommend bringing them to just a really simple swap. It's not rocket science, guys. It's just bringing the legs out in front into our Dandasana or our staff pose. So this way they can engage the inner thighs. You could even put a block between the knees so that they're really engaging, helping to strengthen these muscles that support the pelvis. And while everyone else is folding forward, they too can forward fold here. And it's not going to feel like such a big change for them. They don't have to make many movements while everyone else is opening up the legs. They're just keeping them straight. All right, so second really common pregnancy yoga pose is good old Malasana or our low squat. Obviously not appropriate if you've got SI pain because we've got the knees wider than the hips, which is creating lots of space here. However, this can be such a great pose because we can bring awareness to that pelvic floor. So if you're still wanting to incorporate that into your pregnancy yoga class, this is what I would do for students with that pelvic instability. I'd move one foot in and I'd take the other foot out straight. So you could still, if it feels okay for their body, let the knee fall out to the side a little bit so you're getting a little bit of inner thigh stretch. But again, really checking in with your students. They could bring one hand onto the knee in mudra, one hand onto the belly, and while you're bringing that pelvic floor awareness in, they've still got that little bit of opening just to really have that mind-body connection there. So that's what I would do to modify Malasana while everyone else is here. Your other students are here. Or the other students can be with them. You could always just do half Malasana with the rest of the students and just take that other leg out wider. So this is just the modification, bringing that leg in. All right, so our next pose is our good old pigeon pose. I've had many women in many classes be in this pigeon pose and you can just see them. They're loving it. It feels so good in their bodies and they're sinking deeper and deeper and deeper. And then I get an email or a message from them a couple of days after class and they tell me they're feeling some pain in the low back or in the front of the vagina and you're like, oh, I knew I should have said, come out a little in that pigeon. Often what feels amazing can sometimes be a little too much on the pregnant body. So when everybody else is coming into pigeon pose, because there will be women who will need pigeon pose. For those women who've got SI, keep that bolster. Come to straddle the bolster and really emphasize pressing the knees into the bolster. So they're really hugging it and maybe they just stay here, lifting pelvic floor off the bolster. So that's that pelvic floor awareness, which helps stabilizing the pelvis, squeezing the inner thighs in, which also helps. If you want to go a step further and it feels okay for them, you could bring the hands behind and come into a hero variation. So still squeezing that bolster with the knees and breathing here for a few breaths. So that can be a really nice one to swap when everyone else is in pigeon. Get them to come up on the bolster and do that strengthening work with the pelvis. All right, so we're bringing it up now, our warrior one. So this is so intense on the pelvis. I still don't love this pose after having my babies. I just find it too much for my hips. It's such a simple modification, this one. Instead of coming into warrior one, which puts a lot of strain on the hips, just lift that back heel, bend that back knee a bit, and focus on really squeezing the inner thighs together. For many of us, the psoas is too tight to have that heel down, and by forcing the pelvis into that position, it's just creating imbalance elsewhere. So instead, I would focus here and then really focus on lengthening and pressing that heel towards the back of the mat. It's not coming down, our focus isn't to get it down, but just to really lengthen out this psoas and to create that stability in the legs rather than that twisting in the pelvis. All right, then we have good old warrior two. So if you have pelvic instability, this is too much because you've got the feet wider than the hips. And what I want you to do instead is get your students to bring the feet either under the hips, or if they're not too out of balance, or you can put them near a wall for balance, get them to bring the feet together and really squeeze the knees in, or again, a little bit open, block between the knees, chair pose, either with the arms above, hands onto the thighs, hands onto the belly always works nicely. That's going to start building that strength they need in the legs, in the glutes, if you can really talk them through engaging their glutes, because that's often what's weak when we've got pelvic instability going on. So this is going to be so much better for their bodies than warrior two, and it's easily workable into your yoga sequence. You bring everyone else to warrior two, you get them to step their feet together, and then you can continue on with your other poses as they work in your sequence. All right, finally we have our goddess, which I often love doing in my pregnancy yoga classes, but it's so bad if you have any pelvic instability. Again, too much opening. So instead of goddess, I would bring them to the wall for a wall squat instead, which is another pose that I do just generally in my pregnancy yoga classes anyway, because it's so good for building that stamina in preparation for birth. So feet are underneath the knees. You're making this nice right angle with the body. You can either have the hands on the thighs or bring them to the belly and really press the shoulder blades and the head into the floor. It gets really intense really quickly, which helps to bring that focus back to using the breath and for teaching why the breath is so important. So they are the 6 swaps that I would do for those really common pregnancy yoga poses that you're probably already using in many of your classes. I hope that helps you to plan your classes and to include these students in your classes safely. If there are any other poses that you would like to know about, you'd like to ask questions about, I have a Facebook group, so I'll leave the link below. You can come and join us over there and ask the question. Or if you would like to join us, I have an online pregnancy and postnatal yoga teacher training. So we deep dive into this topic because it was such an important part of my journey. I had a lot of issues with my pelvis, and bringing that strength back is something that I really focused on. So I'd love to see you in that training if that's something you would like to learn more about. Thanks again for being here, and namaste.